Wow, everyone. The Australian Open 2022, what an absolute unbelievable occasion. Absolute cracker of an event. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. Some serious fireworks in the final few days from when I did my last video. So from the quarterfinals right through to the final, it was just some sensational tennis, some high drama, 5-set matches on the men's side, close matches on the women's side, and the doubles, wheelchair events. It was all kicking off. It was absolutely incredible. So I have to start with the men's final because it's fresh in my memory, and it was just unbelievable. And for me, the biggest takeaway from this final was Daniil Medvedev. I'm just a massive fan of this guy. I have really taken to him. My heart's gone out to Daniil Medvedev in this tournament. I just think he's been absolutely phenomenal with his mentality, with his courage, with his heart in the midst of a partisan crowd that's often on his back. Very rarely has anyone cheering his name out there on the Rod Laver Arena, and he doesn't mind. He really doesn't. It seems to fuel him. He can still overcome this adversity on the court. He's got an unbelievable desire and a focus where he can maintain his level in the midst of the turbulent surroundings. So, massive fan of this guy, Daniil Medvedev. He's not afraid to give it back to the crowd as well if he feels they're on his back. He only had 3 guys in his box all tournament, and it felt like the whole of Rod Laver Arena was on Nadal's side in the final, and yet Medvedev went toe-to-toe with the Spaniard right down to the bitter end, and it was just an incredible display of bravery from the guy, and I've got such admiration for that performance for Medvedev. And it wasn't just in the final. I felt like he did it in the quarterfinal against Felix Auger-Aliassime, where he was down match point, and he somehow managed to pull it out. Despite the fact Felix was throwing the kitchen sink at him, he was able to come through in 5 sets. And then the semi-final again, it was a crowd that was on Tsitsipas's side. Medvedev didn't care. He was able to withheld the pressure. He was able to keep off the storm from Tsitsipas when it came, weather the storm, and then strike when his opportunities arose. So the final against Nadal, it was an incredible match, absolutely unbelievable. So Medvedev gets out to a 2-sets-to-love lead, coming back from 4-1 in the second set. And I think in the third, perhaps the whole accumulation effect of the tournament, the stresses maybe bared heavily on his shoulders in those latter stages of the match. You could see that maybe the occasion got to him a little bit. The fact that Nadal was chasing his 21st Grand Slam, the fact he was up against the crowd again, the fact he'd come through in very testing circumstances in the quarterfinal and the semi-final. So it was just one stage too far for the guy, but he was still fighting to the bitter end, and he broke Nadal when Nadal served for the championship the first time to get to 5-all, and I thought, wow man, fair play. Like, that is just epic to do that in those circumstances. But yeah, it wasn't to be for Daniil, but I'm sure he'll come back stronger from this experience. I'm sure he'll look forward, and hopefully he'll be contending again in many more Australian Opens to come, and hopefully he'll have a little bit more support from the crowd in those games. In terms of the other side, Nadal, extraordinary. Coming up for his 21st Grand Slam, overtaking Federer and Djokovic in the process. It was a special moment for him, and what a champion, what an extraordinary human. Just the guy's dedication, his insatiable hunger and competitiveness on the tennis court to just not ever say die out there. It's just unrivaled, and ultimately it did win through. It did grind down Medvedev. And yeah, it's that tenacity that we've seen from Nadal over a decade and a half, 2 decades even. the guy came through as a teenager and he's still doing the same thing at the age of 35. It's absolutely extraordinary. And something that strikes me about Rafa is it's the fact that you can never suppress him. He just is able to keep rebounding. So if he loses a point, the next point he's coming harder. If he loses a game, the next game he's coming harder. If he loses a set, okay, the next set he's coming harder. And if you kind of flesh that out in terms of a macro outlook on tennis, this guy must be every single day. He's like, okay, that last tournament, we didn't win it. Let's go again. The next tournament, the next tournament. He doesn't seem to allow these setbacks to sit in his system for long. He's straight away onto the next point. He's such an incredible athlete in that regard, and his mentality is extraordinary. So well done, Rafa. He certainly excelled himself this week, and he's come through some incredibly difficult tests himself. The Shapovalov quarterfinal, the young Canadian player was really throwing it at Nadal, everything he had in the locker, but Rafa withstood. And it was the same against Berrettini. It was a little easier for Nadal in that game than it had been against Shapovalov. But Medvedev threw everything he had at Rafa. He was running down everything, making Rafa hit extra shots, and yet Rafa had the answers. And you have to say, across the 5 sets, Rafa was just a little bit more clinical, a little bit more consistent and reliable in the crunch moments. And I think that's what separated the two players. So Medvedev's finishing shot sometimes let him down. When he had that moment where the ball was short and he'd try and crunch a two-hander, or he'd step in with his forehand, he just wasn't quite able to apply the finishing touch in the same way that Nadal was. I feel partly Nadal's technique, it's such heavy topspin that he generates that he's able to sort of really apply a lot of speed in his racket head acceleration, in the knowledge that the ball's going to dip in. Whereas Medvedev's a flat hit, so under pressure, maybe there's less margin for error when you really need to convert on that moment. So, yeah, hats off to Rafa. He was absolutely incredible. And also, on the women's side, it was awesome to see Ash Barty become the first Australian to win at the Australian Open in the singles for 40 plus years. She was incredible in that match against Danielle Collins. So Barty, again, similar to Nadal, she had to come back from a challenging situation. She was 5-1 down in the second set, 2 breaks of serve. It looked as if Danielle Collins had not read the script and was not buying into this idea that there had to be an Australian champion for the first time in 44 years. It was like Danielle Collins was like, no, this is going to be, I'm going to upset the party. But ultimately, it was the Barty party that shone through. And Barty's composure, calmness, assuredness on the court, phlegmatic personality, not going too high, not going too low. And I think that was the difference. I think she was able to maintain that composure, that persona on the court. And yeah, massive respect for that from Barty. Incredible effort. Other subplots, guys, to the tournament, the emergence of a lot of young players. So we're seeing Alcaraz from Spain, 18 years of age. He gave Berrettini, the semi-finalist in the men's singles, a real run for his money. Went to 5 sets. It was a really brutal match, and it could have gone either way. Berrettini afterwards was like, this guy's incredible, this young lad from Spain. So watch out for Alcaraz in the future. Very strongly built guy for a teenager, and he hits a heavy ball, so this guy could be back. And I mentioned Shapovalov and also Felix Auger-Aliassime. I think these 2 guys are also going to ascend to the very heights of the game. They've got a lot of weaponry in their arsenal. They hit it hard. So I expect these younger guys to continue to throw it down to these more experienced heads. But what we've seen in this tournament, though, if you really look at the bottom line is, in the men's side first, that there is still a dominance held by the big names, by the long-standing names. They're not done. So Nadal won here. Djokovic won 3 of the 4 Grand Slams last year. So for all the knocking on the door that's going on in the chasing pack, they're not blowing the screws off the hinges and entering through the door. They're knocking on the door, but it's that next step. So Yes, we're seeing a slight shift in the landscape in men's tennis where more of the younger emerging players are coming through. You can even call Medvedev a slightly more emerging player, but he is more experienced now. But we're seeing evidence that despite the emergence of these guys, there is still a bit of a status quo in tennis, and it's going to take more sustained effort, more training from these up-and-comers to try and dislodge the status quo. And on the women's side, great to see Naomi Osaka back, one of my favourite players, the defending champion here, but she couldn't quite get over the line this time. She fell, I believe, in the last 32 or last 64. I think it was the third round. But great to see her back after all her problems with mental health and the amazing courage she's shown to bring that issue to light about the struggles in terms of mentally sustaining yourself in such a stark, media fraught environment that is sport at the highest level for her. So great to see Naomi back. Barty flying, and I expect more Grand Slams for her. Danielle Collins, she'll be knocking on the door again. And it'll be interesting to see Emma Raducanu, Leylah Fernandez, obviously the two standout players who made the US Open final last year, young teenage talents. Can they continue to improve and mount a challenge to Barty and Osaka and whoever else moving forward? Unbelievable, guys. I have to say, hats off to the Australian Open. It was a fantastic tournament. Loved it. The crowd were incredible. They enjoyed every moment. They made it a very atmospheric occasion that I'm sure everyone enjoyed. So, guys, roll on for the rest of the tennis calendar. It's certainly hotting up. And one wonders, one expects that there'll be more twists, turns, headlines, shenanigans, fireworks as we move into 2022. Okay, guys, thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. And don't forget, leave any comments if you have any thoughts on the video. Thanks as always, guys. Peace.